and elsewhere, so they continue barge operations in to support the islands, and that the next storm doesn't affect the storm before. That answers your question. So I go here.
Thank you. The big question is, after the chemical fire that occurred in Texas and the fact that you all are being taxed with a second storm, are there any extra precautions that are being taken this time to ensure that that type of thing doesn't happen here? And how taxed is the system for this and for Jose coming in?
Well, the system can be taxed in different ways. I addressed already the life-saving, life-sustaining operational capabilities that we have, all the USAR teams and so forth, which are marshaled by the federal government but provided by the states. They're all rested and refit and ready to come back into the fight. Same with the Coast Guard, the United States military, National Guard, and Title X forces. We're preparing for environmental losses as we should. I can't speak to each and every company's preparation efforts as I stand here. We can continue to monitor that and follow up with you. There'll be steps that are taken from setting down the nuclear facility, the nuclear power facility, to a position of safety. I think they take some kind of warm shutdown posture at some point, depending on the track. So we monitor those things. I was comfortable with the position of most of them. We also look at Okeechobee because that's going to be a big flooding risk and an overflow risk.
Is there anything that you're not comfortable with right now that is an overriding concern?
Yeah, well, we're worried about the fuel shortages. We're worried about whatever worries the governor at this point. But no, to be honest with you, I am setting expectations appropriately here, because as we go through a storm, nobody's ever happy or completely safe. But I am extremely comfortable with the government efforts. Now I want to make sure that people understand that they have a part to play here as well. So, yeah.
Two questions for you, if you don't mind. Number one, taking a step back and looking a little more big picture,
Yep.
You've got wildfires out west, you've got the crisis in Texas that people are still recovering from, you have Irma, Jose on its heels. The resources of the federal government are not unlimited. At what point do you worry that the resources are being stretched too thin if you're not at that point now?
Yeah, no, I don't. As the Chief of Staff, General Kelly, says, the federal government should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. He's absolutely right. We've had cabinet meetings here today, yesterday, and throughout these storm events, focusing on efforts in national security matters around the globe. So I'm pretty comfortable in our ability and our capacity as leaders, but also as institutions, to handle the various different things that come our way. I'm extremely comfortable with President Trump's capacity to do so. He's demonstrated an ability to juggle these issues of complexity on a regular basis, including today. What I do worry about are the financial resources. Congress came and stepped up in a bipartisan way. I think President Trump deserves a lot of credit for putting that together over the last 48 hours. And they've done what the American people really want them to do, and that is act and do what's right, instead of quibbling over things that tend to get in the way of efficient execution of services. And so in this particular case, we're going to have to go back, I'm sure, for additional resources as these storms continue to hurt our states and our citizens. But for now, we're taking a responsible course of action, asking for the money in the appropriate small tranches, and then reassessing and getting better estimates so that we don't overestimate. But we're not doing it in a way that's going to stop or slow down operations. So.
My second question, and actually, do you know what a number would be on that yet, or is it too early?
On a subsequent request? No, a little too early. So, as you know, the approximately $7.5 billion that came for FEMA on this supplemental was a calculated estimate. There's a 6.8 figure roundabout that would be a regular scheduled replenishment at the end of the month for FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund. Those two together were contemplated, so we assume passage of both. The third or future request will be based on estimates of information as we refine them.
And while we have you here, I know you're going to focus on Irma, but I've got to ask about DACA, because there's still a question of what happens to DACA recipients currently serving in the military. There's still no decision. Can you explain why there's a delay in explaining to these folks what's going to happen and when they might be able to expect an answer?
No, I can't. I can tell you that the President put it back on Congress and then asked for his priorities to be met in their solution. In the interim window, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, what the answer is on the military part of DACA, but I thought we were clear. I'll find and make sure I get back to you on that.
Given Harvey and the flooding and the recovery efforts that you talked about, and then what may happen with Irma, there have been reports that you all are reconsidering the flood, reversing the flood plain regulations that the Obama administration put in. Can you talk about whether you are, in fact, reconsidering that, either putting back those regulations or drafting new regulations that would once again toughen back up the flood regulations, given that we're going to be facing a lot of those issues as both of these places recover.
Yeah, no, I won't necessarily accept the premise of the question, but I will answer the spirit of it. So it's not about tough or not tough, it's about smart or not smart. And I think the answer here, I think I went out and did this in one of your publications, the answer here is that we shouldn't use federal money to rebuild in ways that don't anticipate future flood risk. So we need to build back smarter and stronger against floodplain concerns when we use federal dollars. What happened in the President's infrastructure executive order was the rescission of an Obama-era order that had a broad-ranging and overreaching scope into construction permitting. And at the time that we rescinded it, we did so in the hope of expediting infrastructure development in this country, which I think was a smart move for what it's worth. The President certainly did as well. But now what we have to do is replace with thoughtful, whether it's an executive order, regulations, or both, building standards and practices for the expenditure of federal money that makes floodplain and risk mitigation sense. So
there will be some kind of affirmative effort to.
In the interim, I should point out two things here, right? Not to be defensive, but first, that Obama-era executive order had not turned into a regulation yet. So nothing in this storm would have changed whether we acted or didn't act, if that makes sense. So this was not an immediate or poorly thought through step. And then secondly, whether we put forward an executive order or not, we do have the latitude under the current Stafford Act authorities and other laws to put into these rebuilding practices in Texas and Florida appropriate floodplain management practices. But we want to make sure we think through how to codify that for the future in the next month. Ma'am?
On Monday, we're seeing an anniversary, 9/11, and the nation right now is seeing a lot of vulnerability, speaking of how we said. What is the threat level, and what is this administration doing as it relates to moving into this tragic anniversary, remembering this tragic anniversary?
I was kind of personally motivated into service on that day, and that's why I've come back to service here again. The counterterrorism mission is the one I take the most seriously, and President Trump will, as presidents before him and since 9/11, receive a comprehensive picture of the terrorist threat environment and what we're doing to counter it from his senior officials on 9/11. Or I think on Monday we'll do this. We'll get the timing of that to you, and we'll give you a readout. He'll do that. That's a practice that we've started since 9/11. Presidents Bush and Obama maintained that practice. President Trump intends to do the same. And then I'll let the team announce his planned event or schedule of events for attending any ceremonies and paying some respects. But for the most part, I'd encourage the administration, who will, I'm sure, fan out and give appropriate speeches, to show some solemnity that day and not talk too much about policy. It's a day of remembrance and respect.
What's the threat level right now as we go into 9/11 and with the vulnerabilities that we are seeing throughout this nation?
Yeah, no terrorist should view us as vulnerable right now. Farthest thing from the truth. Okay? Second, there is no actionable, credible threat to the United States right now. We run those regular risk posture meetings here at the White House, and we bring together the entirety of the intelligence community when we do so. There is no current, credible, actionable threat, terrorist threat against the homeland, but we will continue to track that. And if we learn of such a thing, we communicate it to our law enforcement authorities and to the public as soon as we learn of it. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Tom, in addition to the issue of supplies of oil and gas, there's the issue of price. And gasoline has got jacked up about 70 cents a gallon. I remember at an earlier briefing you said you'd be monitoring to make sure there isn't gouging.
Yep.
Are you monitoring beyond the issue of supply and demand? Because that seems to be a pretty bad excuse just to raise prices, and to make sure that it's data-based?
Yeah, so the idea is trying to determine, it's a fact-based determination, the difference between gouging and supply and demand price indicators. So I'd ask you to remember one thing, the refineries, at least 5 or 6 of them in Houston, are still down. So we've got a refinery issue on one side, and we've got an increased demand issue on the other side. And so that's necessarily generally going to raise prices, but it's a short-term price spike in our experience. We'll try to differentiate that from gouging as we examine any potential allegations of that practice. But for right now, Floridians are pretty well used to this. And I think they're pretty well used to their Attorney General prosecuting them in Florida. So I'm not of the opinion that I have to issue too many warnings from this podium again. But in case anybody missed me last time, gouging won't be tolerated, period. Okay? Let me see if I can come back real quickly, because I know Sarah's here and has a lot more to do. Governor Mapp, Governor Rosello, Governor McMaster of South Carolina, Scott of Florida, Deal of Georgia, and Abbott of Texas. You're all in our minds. You're all our clients. You're our customer base right now. You're going to set the requirements. We're going to meet those requirements, and as Americans, we're going to get through this. So remember, I started with inform, influence, and inspire. I'm pretty certain that the country saw the people of Texas show us what compassion's all about, and I'm pretty sure the Floridians and South Carolinians are going to step up and match that challenge in the next coming days. Let's say a little prayer for them, and I'll come back out and speak to you as the situation dictates. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.